Hi, Rainbow Room and other little star families, depending how far this video decides to jaunt. I apologize if you can hear in the background that sound. We have a house wren who is using the corner of our house in the roof to attract a female wren. So it knocks really hard on a hard surface, so either the wood or the metal. And apparently, the higher pitch he can make attracts a wren. Now, the female wrens have been flying to our neighbored tree that is just off the porch, and they sit in the top and they go doo-doo, doo-doo. And then the wren that's making the noise does it more. So I'm assuming it's going well, the mating process. We will see if he stops, and then we'll know that he has found a mate. We are in the future going to put some burlap up there as it's quite loud, and put a wren house out in a tree. So that's one of my projects coming up this week, is to make a wren house, which has a metal flap along the front so that he can peck at it and do the same thing he needs to do for the female wren, but just not on our house. Because you can hear it, it's quite loud. And it's from 4 a.m. to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then he takes a little bit of a break, and then he comes back on right before the sun goes down around 6, and then he stops at about 8 o'clock. So we definitely have a new pet. We call him Mr. Wren. And it's interesting to have that be part of my day. But I thought I'd read you a story called Jaden and the Fairy Eggs. And something that I propose you do is to pause the video and go get a piece of paper and some crayons or some markers, and you can draw as I read. If that's too distracting, you can just listen and create afterwards. Maybe go outside and see if you can create a fairy forest in your own space, whether that's drawing a little door on a piece of wood outside and placing it next to a tree, or maybe you already have fairy woods by you. Okay, well, enjoy. Jaden lived in a little town at the end of a winding road. Next to his house was a park, and at the edge of the park was a great forest. The forest was his favorite place for playing, and he called it Knocking Door Tree Forest because right on the edge of the forest path was a knocking door tree. The forest gatekeeper must live there, he thought, and he would always knock on the door just to be polite before he walked down the forest path. There were lots of other doors on other trees in that forest as well, and that's where all Jaden's fairy folk friends lived. Well, he had never actually seen them, but he knew they lived there, for he often heard them playing and laughing. Sometimes he was sure he caught a glimpse of someone dancing with the sunbeams that shone down through the leaves. And sometimes he found little fairy paths they had made, with little dancing rings in the grass under the trees. And thought Jaden, why else would all those trees have doors on them then? Now Jaden was very excited at this time because Easter was coming soon, just like for us. He remembered last year waking up Easter Sunday and going outside to find a little basket on his back doorstep full of shiny colored eggs. I wonder what the fairy folk children find on Easter morning at their doorstep. His mother asked as well. She smiled and said, "You will only find that out if you get up extra early and go out to the forest to see." Well, thought Jaden, I'm allowed to do that? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So he began to think about getting up early and visiting Knocking Door Tree Forest on Easter Sunday. In fact, he was so absorbed with this idea, he forgot to be excited about finding his own Easter eggs. Easter Friday came and Jaden was busy cooking hot cross buns. He carried a plate of them to share with the neighbors on the east and west side of his house. His day was very taken up by cooking, sharing, and eating buns, and he really quite enjoyed it as they are very yummy. Then Easter Saturday came, and he seemed as though the day took on forever, doing little things for his mother around the house and playing with his sister. Then it was Easter Saturday night, and Jaden went to bed very early. "How will I know what time the fairy folk children get up?" he asked his mother. "The sunbeams wake them. You must be there before the sunbeams, at the first call of the kookaburras," which is a tiny little bird, kind of fat. They're about this size. They have a long beak, and they sing very beautiful songs. After this video, you should go look them up. They're really cool. The Sibley book for birds has an app that you can actually hear the sounds of all the birds. You can also just find it on YouTube. Next morning, at the first call of the kookaburras, Jaden woke up and looked out the window. It was still very dark out, but he quietly dressed, and by the time he was crossing the park, a pale morning light was filling the sky. The grass was wet with dew, and this helped him get close to the forest without making much of any noise. He certainly didn't want to risk waking the fairy folk children with his big, noisy feet. When he reached the knocking door tree, he stopped still and looked. He couldn't, apart from seeing a very little ant already busy at their work in the grass by the door, there was nothing else there. He couldn't but help but feel a little disappointed. Maybe the fairy folk children don't get anything for Easter? Maybe I've come too late, or maybe the forest gatekeeper just doesn't have any children. The last thought encouraged him, so he decided to continue walking down the forest path. He crept up to the next tiny little door, and on that tiny little doorstep was a little basket, quite small, with tiny little eggs inside. They were thinner than the carrot seed he helped his mother plant in the garden that week. Jaden kept walking, going from little door to little door all along the path. Outside the next little door was 3 little baskets. Outside the next 2, then the next one, none, then the next one, 1, and so on. He found out where all the little fairy folk children lived. He turned and walked quietly back through. How he would have loved taking just one little basket to show his mother. But he knew that he could never do that, as the fairy children would be disappointed if they didn't have their Easter egg basket. As he walked back, he remembered that he had forgotten about his Easter basket that would be on the back porch. So he took a little speed in his step and ran to the back gate, where he found his Easter basket full of colored eggs. He carried it inside and up onto the kitchen table and started to unpack all the magical eggs out of their straw nest. When he lifted up the bottom egg, hiding in the straw was a tiny fairy basket like the ones he had seen at Knocking Door Forest. And tucked into the basket on top of the tiny eggs was a little note. Some fairy eggs filled with Easter light for a little boy so kind and bright. In your autumn garden sow these little seeds, and come the springtime, the flowers will grow. Well, that story is called Jaden and the Fairy Eggs. I encourage you today to go out and see what you can see at the base of trees or bushes. And see if you can't see any twirls in the grass or footprints. Or maybe you'll see some turkey footprints or different types of birds. Or maybe you even have a house wren that I don't know about. This is a story by Michaela from Rainbow Room. I really enjoyed this little video to be able to be in your homes. I wonder what they all look like. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the day and hope to send another video soon. Much love. Bye.